The much anticipated Final Fantasy set is finally here. With it comes a wide variety of new and powerful cards and a large selection of new legendaries to choose from for Commander deck building. Hi, my name is Shiny Latios, and as your expert on all things dragon related in Magic, I took a close look at this set for new additions and considerations for Dragon Kindred Commander strategies. At first glance, you might think this set does not have much to offer for Dragon players, but look a little deeper and you may be pleasantly surprised. So what am I talking about today? As usual, I evaluate cards as a longtime Dragon player, though my advice can be applied to other Dragon decks too. When I rate cards for my Dragon decks, I start by asking some fundamental questions. If I'm considering a new dragon, is it a good dragon? Does the new card help me achieve my deck's aggressive game plan? Is the new card better than other existing alternatives? Does the new card provide some sort of resource advantage, like mana or card advantage, or possibly both? And finally, does the new card fill multiple roles for what I want to do in my deck? And I rate cards on a basic tier system. S tier is reserved for the best of the best, cards I always want to play in Dragon and Dragon Commander decks. A is the almost always tier, where I put cards that I highly recommend playing, but can see corner cases where they may not always make the cut. B is the best in budget or bracket 3 tier. Cards in this tier are ones that I would be happy to play if I'm limited to a budget or aiming to make a lower power deck, usually in bracket 3 or lower, but probably wouldn't play them in a bracket 4 deck where I likely have better options. C is the okay tier. Cards in this tier are not particularly bad, but they aren't particularly good either, so I usually don't recommend playing cards in C tier. D is the do not play tier, where I usually put cards that are better suited for strategies other than Dragon Kindred decks. And as always, you can find my current deck list at theurdragon.com. I'll include links below in the video description to my decks and to the Dragon Discord server, where you can come and chat about all Dragon and Dragon EDH things. With that, let's dive into some new cards. The first card I'm looking at is Summon Bahamut, which is a 9/9 Saga Dragon enchantment creature for 9 generic mana. Like all sagas, it immediately enters with 1 lore counter and gains another after subsequent draw steps. At chapters 1 and 2, Bahamut destroys up to 1 target non-land permanent, and at chapter 3, you draw 2 cards. Finally, on chapter 4, Mega Flare, Bahamut deals damage equal to the total mana value of other permanents you control to each opponent. As one of the obvious bombs in this set, Bahamut is an incredibly powerful card that is sure to win you the game if you ever get to the 4th chapter. Helpfully, it also immediately impacts the board when it comes down. Its major downside, however, is that unless you have some way to advance your lore counters, it takes 4 turns to do all of these amazing things. The likelihood that you get to the 4th chapter naturally is very low. Being a 9/9 dragon, Bahamut will either be removed by your opponents by then or remove the opponents. At 9 mana, or 8 if I'm in Dragon, I generally want to play cards that do a little more than just destroy a single non-land permanent when they come in. When I cast a card like Majestic Genesis or Draco Genesis, these cards help fill my board with lots of dragons and other permanents the same turn I cast them, providing a much bigger impact when I spend that amount of mana. I think Bahamut can do a lot of work in lower power metas, or if you can cheat it into play somehow and keep it around or add more lore counters to it faster. But personally, I'm not too keen on playing this card in Dragon Kindred decks, and don't recommend that you do either. While this card is definitely the coolest dragon from the whole set, I think it fits in B tier at the very best. It'll shine in lower power brackets where it belongs. In addition to Summon Bahamut, there are a variety of other dragon cards in this set that I generally relegate to D tier. I don't think these cards should be played in Dragon Kindred decks, and they should likely be relegated to their own specific strategies. While new dragon cards in Final Fantasy aren't too impressive, the real appeal of this set is the number of new unique support cards. They offer additional resources in ramp, card draw, protection, and more. Let's take a look. The first support card I want to talk about is Lifestream's Blessing. An instant for green and 4 generic. It draws X cards, where X is equal to the greatest power among creatures you controlled as you cast this spell. And if this spell was cast from exile, you gain twice X life. It can be foretold by exiling it face down for 2 generic mana, letting you cast it on a later turn for just 4 and a green. Over the years, Wizards has introduced numerous iterations on the draw cards equal to the greatest power you control effect. Among those types of cards, Lifestream's Blessing stands out as the best version yet. Instant speed is great, but the biggest reason I rate this card as A tier is because of the as you cast this spell text. For example, if I cast Rishkar's Expertise, or a similar variant, when I only control 1 creature, and an opponent responds by removing my creature, I end up drawing no cards, which is a major blowout to me. But with Lifestream, this risk is now averted. Removing my creature in response to me casting the spell won't stop me from drawing cards. Its upsides are also very potent. Not only is Lifestream's Blessing an instant, but when cast from exile, the card also gains me double life. As a reminder, Lifestream's Blessing does not need to be foretold to gain that benefit. As long as you can cascade or discover into it or cast it from exile in another way, you will gain life in addition to drawing cards. This instant speed, removal safe, and life gain upside draw spell makes it an A tier inclusion in any big creature deck, especially in Dragon Kindred decks that run green. Dragon decks often tend to be slower than more aggressive, low to the ground strategies, meaning that go wide token decks can often do a lot of damage before the dragons start rolling out. Cast from exile, Lifestream's Blessing helps stabilize the life player's total and fill your hand with resources, all at instant speed, making it a great inclusion for recharging your spent hand. Next, I'm looking at Ultimate Magic Holy. This is an instant for white and 2 generic that grants your permanents indestructible till end of turn. Like Lifestream's Blessing, it is another card with Foretell, the cost of which here is also 2 and a white, and it grants the additional benefit of preventing all damage that would be dealt to you this turn if you cast it from exile. Being able to foretell this card allows you to keep it safe from hand disruption effects like Windfall and Wheel of Fortune, which is a benefit also enjoyed by Lifestream's Blessing. At first glance, when cast from hand, it does look like an overcosted Heroic Intervention or Dawn's Truce, and it doesn't even provide the entire effect because it doesn't grant hexproof like those cards do. However, when casting Ultimate Magic Holy from exile, it can be used defensively against a massive attack or burn damage. For example, compare this to Teferi's Protection. While Protection is considerably better at saving you and your board than Ultimate Magic Holy, Teferi's Protection is also a game changer for that reason. It's generally disallowed at brackets 1 and 2, and at bracket 3, where you're only allowed up to 3 game changers, it takes up one of those critical slots. For players who want this sort of defensive magic effect, but want to keep their dragon deck to a bracket 3 or lower, Ultimate Magic Holy offers a viable alternative. While it's not quite as protective as Teferi's Protection, it will do a good job of protecting you in most cases, but importantly, frees up a critical game changer slot. I put this card in B tier. It's not for every dragon deck, but it could be a good lower power alternative. As an honorable mention, Restoration Magic is an even cheaper alternative to Heroic Intervention and Dawn's Truce that provides additional life gain. So it's something you can keep in mind as well. Now, moving on from Great Foretell Instance, Tataru Taru is a 0/3 Legendary Dwarf Advisor creature for 1 generic and a white. When she enters, you draw a card and target opponent may draw a card. You get to decide. Whenever an opponent draws a card, if it isn't that player's turn, you create a tapped treasure token, and this ability only triggers once each turn. Card draw and mana production together on a single card should never be overlooked, especially when it comes in a low mana cost package. Tataru immediately replaces herself, and at the cost of giving one opponent a single card, can also ramp you on the same turn. She's akin to a lower power Smothering Tithe, but with the added benefit of not being a game changer, making her a competitive alternative. Ironically, however, Tataru shines best in high power metas, when players are running lots of effects like Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora. This means her usefulness will be limited in lower power metas if your opponents are not drawing cards on other players' turns, which is something to keep in mind. But if you want a low-cost, occasional treasure engine that replaces herself immediately, Tataru is best girl. While better ramp options exist, especially as you branch out into more colors like in Ur-Dragon, Tataru can still provide occasional mana for cheap, so she gets a C tier rating. Next, we have the Fire Crystal, which is a legendary artifact for 2 red and 2 generic. It reduces the cost of all your red spells by 1 generic, and also gives creatures you control haste. And for 6 mana, red, and 4 generic, you can tap the Fire Crystal to create a token copy of target creature you control, sacrificing it at the beginning of the next end step. As an aggressive creature archetype, Dragon Kindred decks tend to rely a lot on haste enablers. The sooner dragons can attack, the sooner opponents start dying. As both a haste enabler and a cost reducer, the Fire Crystal offers a lot of potential upsides to dragon decks. It's also worth mentioning that the last ability can be used at instant speed. This means that you can hold up mana to activate this on an opponent's turn, whether to make a blocker or do it on their end step. That way, you start your turn with an additional creature that can attack. The cost reduction is nothing to snuff at either. Even in Ur-Dragon, most of the deck is basically red dragons, and there are a bunch of non-dragon red spells that we play as well. So being able to reduce the cost of all red spells that I cast is a powerful aspect of this card. Unfortunately, its mana cost significantly holds it back, particularly in Ur-Dragon. When I have 4 mana, I want to be playing my first 5-drop dragons. Something like Bonehorde Dracosaur or Baitor, kin to all, reduced by the Ur-Dragon's Evidence ability. If I take a turn off to give future dragons haste, this just means that my dragons are coming down a turn later, which leaves me vulnerable for an extra turn. The 1 generic cost reduction, while it does apply to all my red spells, it is not quite strong enough to, for example, power out 2 dragons on the subsequent turn. And then as dragons become more varied in their colors, especially if you look at many of the cards from Tarkir, this card will apply to fewer and fewer of them over time, making it narrower in its applicability. Taking everything together though, I would rate this card as B tier for Ur-Dragon and possibly higher for dragon commanders with fewer colors. For example, this card curves very well in a Lathliss deck. You can cast the Fire Crystal on turn 4, and on turn 5, Lathliss will cost just 5 mana. So I would rate this as A tier for her specifically. Reducing the cost of red spells is great, and granting haste is great, but paying 4 mana for this effect is not so great. I see it as a side grade to Gimli's Reckless Might. In Dragon, better haste granting effects exist at 3 mana or less. Moving on, Bugenhagen, Wise Elder, is a 1/3 legendary human shaman creature for 1 and a green. It has reach and taps for 1 mana of any color. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with power 7 or greater, draw a card. Overall, I would rate this as a C tier mana dork. As with Tataru, I like card draw and mana ramp on the same card. What I don't like is needing 7 power to trigger that card draw, and only once per turn. 7 power is a very high bar to clear. Even my Dragon deck only has 7 dragons with 7 or more power. If I wanted to play this card and see it draw reliably, I would want to see at least 10 creatures in the deck meet that threshold before considering this card. Another considerable drawback is the fact that I need to keep the creature alive until my next turn. I only draw on my upkeep, so I play a big threatening creature, and then I have to wait an entire turn cycle to gain that benefit. Despite costing more mana and being more color intensive, I would rather play a mana dork like Helga, Skittish Seer, or even Kiora before considering Bugenhagen, as they provide card advantage immediately. Mana dorks and rocks that cost 2 mana and the tap for any color are increasingly common nowadays, and I think many better options exist. As one recent example, Herd Heirloom is a great budget alternative that can tap for mana the turn it's played and can provide occasional card draw. While I don't generally recommend that you play Bugenhagen, it might not be a bad option in a budget build over something more expensive like Bloomtender, or if you're running fewer colors in like a 2-color dragon deck. Buster Sword is an equipment artifact that costs 3 generic to cast and 2 to equip. The equipped creature gets +3/+2, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, and then you may cast a spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to that damage without paying its mana cost. Equipment are not typically what you expect to see in a Dragon Kindred deck unless they are comboing with other cards. Think something like the Reaver Cleaver and Aggravated Assault. But, like other cards I've already talked about, Buster Sword provides both card advantage and mana advantage by drawing cards and letting you cast spells for free. Slap this onto any dragon, and you're nearly guaranteed to be able to cast another dragon with the damage dealt. Double Strike also doubles the effectiveness of this card. Its downside, like with all equipment, is that it needs to be equipped to a creature. It also needs the creature to connect to a player for as much damage as possible. While most dragons do have flying, and some have trample, it may still sometimes be a challenge to fully realize the potential of this card. For example, if the equipped creature has trample, but only 1 point of damage gets through to the defending player, you can only cast a spell worth 1 mana or less. Unfortunately, Buster Sword doesn't provide any evasion itself, making it harder for the equipped creature to connect. I would compare this to other cards that cheat permanence into play, like Broodcaller Scourge or even Emoti. It promises to be a very fun card if you can make it work, but that takes some effort. For dragon decks, that effort is probably best spent elsewhere, so I give Buster Sword a C tier. Moving on, budget players. It's finally time to retire Grand Colosseum. Starting Town is a town subtype land that taps for colorless, or you can pay 1 life to add 1 mana of any color. Importantly, Starting Town enters untapped during the player's first 3 turns of the game when having access to mana is more critical. A general rule of thumb for deck building is that you should minimize the amount of lands that enter tapped, even if those lands tap for more than 1 color. So for example, a Boros Guildgate is generally going to be worse than a basic mountain or a plains. A deck with lots of tapped lands will be slower and less able to cast spells on curve than a deck with untapped lands. In this way, Starting Town is better than other lands that enter tapped, but worse than lands that always enter untapped. While I think this card is better than Grand Coliseum and other tapped variants, I think it's worse than variants like City of Brass or Mana Confluence, both of which always enter untapped. Sure, this card can save you some life over the course of a game by tapping for colorless when you don't need an additional color, but I would rather have the guarantee of always having an untapped land rather than saving a few extra life points. Overall, I think this card slots right into B tier. If you are on a budget and need another 5-color land, I would play this over other 5-color lands that always enter tapped. It's not as bad as the most budget options, but not as good as the most premium options either. So you might be asking, what Final Fantasy cards am I testing in my personal decks? I'm very excited to test with Lifestream's Blessing and the Fire Crystal in my budget deck. Blessing is a natural replacement for Return of the Wild Speaker, and while my 3-drop slot remains a little tight, the Fire Crystal seems like a good side grade to Gimli's Reckless Might as a haste enabler and cost reducer. I have also been testing with Ultimate Magic Holy as a decent budget alternative protection spell to protect myself and my board from wipes. While the prices here are what these cards were going for as of release day, I'm hopeful that Tataru Taro and Starting Town might come down in price over the next few months as more of them become available. In conclusion, while the Final Fantasy set is fairly light on good dragon cards for dragon kindred strategies, it nonetheless provides Dragon Commander players a variety of new support tools. For the most part, these tools are a little narrower or a little less powerful than pre-existing cards, but they still offer budget and lower power players very strong alternatives to consider. Overall, the Final Fantasy set gives us more options to work with, which is always a good thing. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope that you found this guide to be helpful as you consider new cards for your dragon decks. Are there any cards that you think I missed? Is there another card that has caught your eye for your dragon deck? Please let me know in the comments below, as I'm always very happy to hear what cards you are looking at to play in your decks. Thank you again, and until next time, goodbye.